everybody is doing well and keeping safe. A very warm welcome to today's session on starting a deep tech startup by CIIIT Hyderabad and Headstart. So as of 2020, we've had more than 2,100 deep tech startups in India, and the number is only increasing by the day. CIE at IIIT Hyderabad has been fostering deep tech startups through its accelerator programs, and called Avishkar. Avishkar brings together the deep tech expertise of IIIT Hyderabad's research labs and technology mentoring opportunities that help startups build quality products within a very accelerated timeline. Startups go through structured business mentoring from co-creation consulting, customer introductions, and investor connects for follow-on rounds of investments. I will definitely drop more details on the same on the chat for everybody to explore. Now, getting back to the session for the day, we're very excited to have two people with immense interest and knowledge in the deep tech sector. We have Professor Ramesh Loganathan, who heads research innovation at IIIT Hyderabad. He'll be talking to Ganapathy Venugopal, who is the co-founder and CEO at Axilor Ventures. VG, as he is more popularly known, was the head of strategy and planning at Infosys prior to co-founding Axilor Ventures. He helps founders build successful businesses and also serves on the board of several companies and advisory bodies. He's an active writer on issues relating to startups, and we look up to him for his insightful views on the startup ecosystem. Likewise, we're looking forward to today's session, and where these two experts will be talking about starting a deep tech startup. So I would like to welcome you both, and I would like to just give you over the stage. So thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Vanya. So VG, very happy to be on this session. So been a while since with the pandemic and all travel pretty much switched off. So we haven't had a chance to talk much in almost a year now. So very happy to be here on this session. And a topic very close to both our hearts, deep tech startups, and particularly kind of very, very relevant in our world at IIIT, which is the seeding of young startups. How do deep tech startups get seeded, get ideated, and what happens in the very early stages? So that's what we're going to be discussing today. And VG works with almost every startup they invest in, work with, and I'm sure VG helps many other startups outside of their portfolio are all deep tech startups. Many coming from research, and others, even if not from research, using some cutting edge.
Not all, 1/4 of them, certainly.
1/4
Significant 1/4 of them.
Yeah, so which is so now that is also a problem. Why only 1/4? Because if you look at startups, even our incubator, if you take the incubator also, so we have about 100 odd startups at any given point. Less than 20-25 would be startups using technology at a level that even a professor could advise them. It's not even from research. Even a research level knowledge that might help a startup is less than 25%. So there are not too many startups that use technology at that level today, unfortunately. Yes, they're doing some innovation, no doubt. They're solving a market problem. But our interest is how do you build those deep tech solutions? So that's what we're going to be discussing. So let's lay the ground, VG, first. In your experience, all these years working with technology-based solutions, and specifically tech startups, how do we define a deep tech startup? So let's just put some, I know it's anybody can view it any different ways. What's your definition of a deep tech startup?
See, every business has a certain trajectory. Obviously, if you're building out a business, there has to be a customer. There is a real problem of the customer that you're solving with your solution. And over a period of time, the solution that you have come out with, is addressing a larger and larger problem, and then you are able to expand the relevance of that solution to a large set of customers. That's the typical trajectory of most businesses, whether deep tech or otherwise. In my mind, the only complication or addition that I see for a deep tech startup is there are 4 distinct stages, right? There is proof of science, there is proof of technology, proof of business, and proof of scale. Now, for most technology startups, I think once they have identified the need, they really start at the fag end of proof of technology, quickly get on to proof of business, right? Can it really, is it monetizable? Are customers willing to use, pay for it? And then the focus is entirely on building out a scale, building out scale. The big difference between deep tech startups and most other startups is this mysterious stage of proof of science, right? Now, proof of science is essentially unpredictable, long gestation, and in some sense, you have to build something unique that takes time to build, right? So that I think would be the biggest um, difference I see among most startups, right? You talked about 100 startups in your in IIIT incubator, of which 20 or 25 are worthy of even a professor willing to commit time. Most of them would be at the proof of science, right? The validation of that, whether it is unique enough, whether the IP is strong, whether it is difficult to build, whether it is defensible, whether the credibility of that is high, right? What people are trying to build. I think that is the big difference. A lot of work that happens in research labs, that happens in institutions, it is possible for us to call them as some bit of scientific work. But if you really have to convert that into something that will work in real life, that will work in the real world, and then on top of it, whatever is working, for it to have real impact, right? For it to hit the market, I think the journey is long. But the proof of science bit and the bar that you have for what you constitute as validation of that science will fundamentally define how deep tech a startup is.
I was on mute, sorry. So that's a very nice way of putting it, proof of science. Now, when we talk about startups that are kind of build something and that are looking at validation, if I further break that proof of science into a few chunks, most startups are probably in the later stage of proof of science. They're not actively engaged in research. Now, and then they just using some cutting edge work happening knowledge-wise, but then the far end of it very close to technology in terms of what they're using. So those are the ones that will benefit just by talking to a professor. There's a validation, like you rightly said. Research, on the other side, on the other hand, is on the beginning age of that proof of science, and very, very far from becoming technology or a product. They are on that end. Now, how do you see these two? How often do you see that these two converge? Where there is cutting edge research happening, which is classic research, publications, conferences, journals, and such, something new is being done. And then on the other end of startups using some similar, how do you bridge this gap?
See, on the one hand, we have a very romantic notion of scientific discoveries, right? There is an element of serendipity, there is an element of accident, there is an element of finding a use case for something that it was not originally intended for, right? And these are all stories that take up a lot of headlines that are very good to narrate as stories. They have a lot of amusement value. In some cases, they also could have produced something significant. But I think when we really look at a framework for building out deep tech startups, right? I think we cannot entirely depend on serendipity and accidents, right? And in my mind, the empirical evidence for technology having been bought out and built out into great startups without the founders having been the originators of that innovation, that has been more successful in corporate large companies buying out technologies than in smaller companies which are founder run, right? So then essentially we are talking about how can innovators doing some deep research, proprietary research, can really build out businesses, right? I'll give you an example of, one of the most interesting startups I have worked with, right? There's a company from IIT Madras called Detect, right? Now, Detect started out as a project, second year project of students who were working on some technology around non-destructive testing. And they were working with Professor Krishnan Balasubramaniam, who's one of the top 10 experts in this field. And the non-destructive testing lab in IIT Madras also is a very well-known one, right? Quite well accused. What started out as a small a kind of student research project, with one IP getting built on top of it. By the time they were in the final year, it was almost a sensor that could be fitted around oil and gas pipes, to detect non-destructively whether the pipe integrity was high, right? Because material defects are very hard to detect in process industries, because high temperature, high volume, high throughput fluids are just moving around. And they were lucky enough to apply the technology and get a pilot going with Reliance, right? So the entire time taken from converting something like a non-destructive technology, and whatever they had built out, even at a pilot stage, was 3 times better. It could handle temperatures 3 times higher than that of a comparable GE product, right? So I'm sure the professor had a role to play. I'm sure the students were looking at what was getting built. But the most important thing is, in a short span of about 18 to 24 months, what started out as a research project, which could have stayed in the lab, found a real life use case, even though the product was not ready, right? Which started because, given the professor's background, I think there was a lot of queries around, can something like this be built, right? So the matching of a potential problem somebody is facing, right? The earlier you put it into your development process, the chances of you building something that somebody wants, right? Especially given the uncertainty and the gestation that the typical deep science or a deep tech project has, right? I think having a potential commercial application, a large one at that, in the back of your mind, right, while working on these technologies, I think is a useful discipline to build. Wherever it has happened, I know of one other company which was in material sciences, right? And they had actually, while they had perfected the science on applying some kind of a chemical as a coating on clothes, right, as a potential antivirus or something that could prevent absorption of toxic elements into the skin, right? While the science was validated on one side in the lab, the innovator had correspondingly looked at, he had come in from a farming family, and he knew that the state from which he hailed from, the pesticide related cancer was the highest, right? And he noticed that farmers invariably wrap their face, right, while spraying pesticides. While on the face of it, it seems like a logical one, because it prevents the chemical and the fumes and the drops from going inside. The cloth cover actually acts as a good base for absorbing, right? So the essential exposure was much higher than what anybody would have thought. And this always bothered the innovator. So while the science was getting perfected, he was constantly asking himself, can I really use it to give an overall or a cloth which people can wear, where the potential pesticide, which is carcinogenic, on the impact with the disintegrates and becomes harmless, right? Again, the potential use case coming out of the personal background of the innovator embedded very early on into the ideation process. And now when COVID hit, they were able to repurpose the same technology for masks. They were able to repurpose the same technology for fabric, apparels, right, especially for healthcare workers. So that, I think, is a good discipline to have, Ramesh.
No, I think this was a fantastic example. I think both these examples, where if you look at the professor's work, probably the professor was not maybe aware of use cases, but was not actively looking for any of those use cases. The professor was doing their research work. Very enterprising students came in who started off on the research end of that work, working with the professor, saw the opportunity, kind of connected the dots, and kind of took it all the way, like you said, within 24 months to an actual deployment in a large a group as large as Reliance. And I think, but this discovery is the biggest challenge. The way I see the research groups by themselves are not either aware of, or they're not interested, even they're capable of doing it, not interested in finding those use cases. Their interest is more research. They finish one problem, they go on to the next problem. So some of them are probably not even, their inclination is not, attitude or capability also is not there in some cases to spot those possibilities. In other cases, the interest is not there. Those with interest are not connected to research. And some of them are connected to research, but again, they also don't have the ability to. So that science on the research end and the market end, are there any via media where this also is that the way I look at it, like this also is providence that some student that was enterprising enough came in and decided to work with this professor and then had the kind of the aptitude and abilities to spot these use cases and build for it. Have you seen models of some other models of this happening?
Different places have adopted different models, and all of them are valuable in different contexts, right? Some institutions have clearly set aside or put together an office that is essentially focused on gathering an inventory of problems that industry wants solved. Right now, it is highly unlikely that the innovator is really bothered about the inventory of problems out there, because their initial interest is in producing science that can with high credibility. So you can create a separate entity that is only going around gathering, and that can then find a match between, typically technology transfer offices in most US universities are profit centers. And their only role is in being able to gather, an institution like IIT Madras has done it successfully, but there are some 17 to 20 industry folks, right, who are creating that bridge. That is one institutional structural model that can solve for this. So you don't really disturb the innovator. They continue to work on what they want, but you can constantly nudge them and find the demand on one side, where the industry can pull that innovation out, right? Either through licensing or buying out, or even a company can be set up. Right? That's one. The second model, I think more prevalent in UK, is constantly encourage conversations among people of diverse backgrounds, right? It could be industry versus scientists in a very non-defensive environment, right? It's not like you're constantly looking for something to come out of this, just a free exchange of ideas. So the innovators themselves learn from others, right? There is somebody from the industry who is telling the innovator, if you made this change and if this technology were slightly different, I would find this very useful, right? I think in scientific research, diversity and conversations, if that can be engineered, I think it will go a long way in changing the mindset of people. And I am fairly certain that however scientific bent of mind most innovators or researchers have, like in any population, there is always a 5 to 10% category that is different, that wants to experiment, right? So the trick is in finding the 5 to 10, making successes out of them, and then the next 30% trying to get inspired by this 10 who have been successful. And then once you hit 40, like in any system, I think the system will tip, because then it has acquired a certain momentum. So you can create a separate entity that will look at acting as a bridge between industry and their needs and what research is happening. Incentives among institutions and the researchers again play a big role, so long as they see a potential for this to be commercialized. In some cases, the motivation could be for the innovation to really see a market need solved. In some cases, it could be monetary or financial incentives. The other one, I think an easier one, is just to encourage conversations, right? Just break the boundaries, get people to step out of their places, have conversations with folks who are unlike themselves.
Absolutely. This roundtable is called confidence. You pick a reasonably not too narrow, not too broad, kind of a domain area and have conversations between, it's a small group, they're typically anywhere from 4 hours to sometimes even 2 days, curated set of subtopics. Each block has one topic being discussed, and it's mostly in a discovery format. You're not supposed to debate. You can ask clarifying questions, but no debate, no discussion. And the idea is to research tables, what they are doing, what the problem the general community is looking at in that area. Large companies look at what are they building right now, what are some of the challenges they're looking at in the next 1 or 2 years. Startups come and say what they're innovating, policymakers. So we did that precisely for the purpose, but unfortunately, we don't do it as often as we should be doing. There's a catalog exercise, like the problems catalog, but we, in spite of trying all that, we also have an engineering group. We create products, because sometimes what happens, if the researcher or the research group is not interested in taking it forward as a product, there's often a gap, especially in computing, because a lot of it is just algorithms and papers, unlike in, say, materials and such, where the composition, the molecule or itself is good enough to productize. In software, the algorithm is like a very generic algorithm that you have to kind of do something with it to solve a problem often. And if the research group is not interested in doing it, and the startup is, or somebody, the one that wants to build is too remote from research, it never happens. So we said, let's build that engineering group in the middle that will work with the researcher, start building the first version of the product, and then see who we can license it to. Even that is so hard. For instance, like just discovering in some cases, I'll give an example. We have this lip sync technology done by one of our most prolific Professor Jawahar, you probably know of him. His work got very, very good attention. It was work that got into conference early last year, into one of the leading computer vision conference. It basically, from the synthesized sound and few videos of the speaker, phonetic, it creates a phonetic model. From the synthesized sound, the lip is modified to synchronize with the translated. The person spoke in English. You can now make the person speak in Telugu or Tamil or Kannada with the lip synchronized with the translated text. And the speech synthesis also, there's a different product, different work, which will get in that person's voice itself. You recognize, translate, synthesize in that person's voice, and then synchronize the lips. Now, we just finding it so hard to find a commercially compelling use case. We found a lot of use cases. Now, do you see, now that itself, in my view, that's all the whole product management, right? Some of the best founders, startup founders are fantastic product managers. They creatively can connect, spot dots and connect dots. Have you seen some very offbeat products that have come out where like some crazy connection of dots was made?
We have a company in our portfolio called Niramai, which is reasonably well known. They are using thermal imaging for breast cancer screening, right? The actual underlying technology and the patent was developed as a side project when the original founders, Geeta, who's a PhD in artificial intelligence from IISc, and Nidhi, who's an engineer and an MBA from IIM Bangalore, right? They were doing it as a side project while they were working on something else at Xerox Labs, right? And then they figured out that this is, the founders were passionate enough to solve for this, because, breast cancer is one of the most easily detectable cancer and one with the highest, detection rate if done earlier on. Right? And it is also one of the highest fatality in terms of cancer deaths, only because it is detected late. Right? And the existing modalities are privacy invasive, and they themselves are exposed to radiation, so they themselves contribute to something. In countries like Europe, they don't allow you to do a mammogram within a gap of 2 years. Right? That is how behind the existing technologies are. So they came out, bought the IP out, and then built this technology out, and now they've already got a CE approval for their technology, and currently applying to FDA. So there are several examples of how people have gone after, right, or taken the existing technology, which independent of its source of development or origin of development, right? But all of which goes back to the same question: whom are you building for? Right? I was recently on the technical advisory committee of one of the leading institutes of national eminence in India, right? And they had come up with a plan where they said that we will fund your research on the condition that you need to get an equivalent amount from industry to sponsor, right? It's a brilliant scheme because you provide financial assistance to a professor for them to continue their research. By making sure that there is a matching grant that is coming from the industry, you are confident that whom are you building for is taken care of. The overall construct incentivizes everybody to increase the capital contribution early on so that you can support the research long enough. And you can tweak the milestones such that you are able to commit more and more capital after there is clear evidence that it is moving from proof of science to proof of technology. Right. So, I mean, if we think it is important, I think there are enough structural and non-structural mechanisms we can think of to incentivize. But for anything to come out into the market in the real world and make a difference, we have to answer the question, whom are you building this for? The earlier we ask this question in the research process, higher will be the yield of successful innovation that are able to change something out in the world.
So which is the Israeli model, right? I mean, in Israel, it often happens. The technology transfer officers meet with the professors as they're starting their work and have a conversation with them saying, look, if you're going to be doing this, why not you do kind of modify your problem statement a little bit because there is this unsolved problem that you may be able to solve. But I don't think anywhere else it happens as well as it does in Israel. But even post-fact, after it has happened also, just the like when we go, for instance, in our technology transfer office, when we go talk to professors, and when we talk to them and say, look, tell us what can somebody do with your work? You've done all this work in this area, whatever the area is. First thing they will tell is like, no, my work is very, very academic. There are no use cases for it. And then we have to kind of nudge saying, look, you know what, this work, don't you think it can be used for this? Now, when we started this process 3 years back, almost every single professor said, my work, there can't be any use for it. And today, now at least 20% of the professors reach out to the technology transfer office saying, look, I have this thing, can we look at making a product out of this? So I think we still don't get strong connect. Like you said, discovering the right problem to solve, worth solving is, if that is done, I think in my view, that is 80% of the job done in terms of translation. If you discover the right problem, then things will happen. Unless the technology is not all there. If technology is there, the right things will happen after that. And that is the most difficult, discovering the right problem. If there are no entrepreneurs, I mean, you talk about the technology transfer office that could do this. Industry and research kind of jointly kind of compiling a set of problems so that the researchers can look at it is another way. Is there a third party that could help with this discovery? What could is there somebody who can help with this discovery? Because we, like, if you
there are different models possible. In places like Japan, there are venture funds which are funded by where the LPs are corporates, right? The primary mandate of the venture fund is to look for innovations which is there in the corporate's roadmap, which they themselves don't have the capability to build up. Right? There are specialized venture curation organizations in the US whose only competitive advantage is knowing who is working on what in specific areas across research labs. And then they do the matchmaking. Even at Axilor, I think we have been thinking about this problem, but now we are confident of taking it upon ourselves. So we launched recently an initiative called Axilor Labs. It's still not announced, but we are working with a company where the model is essentially you don't disturb the innovator, right? So for any deep tech startup to be successful, you need a chief scientific officer who's holding the science, building credibility, and who's the primary innovator, right? Now, these people, given their mental makeup, given their prior training, right, they are not comfortable stepping out of research labs.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
Whereas for that innovation to really come out, you need somebody to drag it out of the lab, take it beyond the proof of science, figure out, get exposure, validate technology, and see how it can be built out into a business, which is the role of a chief business officer. Right? Now, if you find a good enough innovator, if you have the conviction that this is a problem worth solving, and if this innovation comes out, there is enough demand for something like this, can you really create an institutional model where you can offer the CBO to the innovator and create a company where the innovator is continuing to do what they like doing? The CBO from your side is really, almost like a co-founder who is building the business, right? And take it to a certain level. And after that, you figure out a way to get somebody professional coming in because a lot of risk is taken care of. There is clear validation. There are some early customers. That is another model. Not easy to implement, but we are trying out. It has worked well in other markets. Now the quality of researchers in India is definitely as good as anywhere else in the world. So it would be a shame if we don't experiment with these models and see what works and what doesn't.
No, absolutely. I think we should exchange notes on this. I'll call you later sometime. So our experiment with our product lab, where we are trying, the hypothesis was exactly what you said. The innovator doesn't want to do anything other than research, right? They may be okay to participate in something else, but something else is never the priority for their time. Research is what ticks them, research is what drives them, and therefore they want to be doing. So we tried that in our incubator, trying to kind of nudge our professors or research teams to go become innovators. It didn't work. After 5-6 years, we gave up. The product labs is about 2.5 year experiment. So where we say, like, look, we have an engineering group. We'll identify the product. We'll work with you. We tell the professor, you just give us an hour a week at most. That's enough. You just need to be an advisor because your technology being, your work being productized. And we find an entrepreneur through the AIR program. So we start building, and along the way, find an entrepreneur, license it. Now, it's working okay, but not as well as we would like. So I will pick your brains on that and see if there are any suggestions. On the other thing that you mentioned,
model, we are also able to provide the initial capital required. That is one big problem taken care of. So right up to
sorry, I was going to say that is the other thought we had. We tried to talk to a few, especially the M&A, the corporate technology roadmap that you mentioned. So this came from one of our board members. I mean, Srini Raju, you know Srini Raju. So he said, why can't we we just pump a couple of crores or even up to $1 million into a crack team, hire from the best. I mean, like if our campus placement jobs are 30 lakhs above, hire that kind of team, challenge them to build something in 18 months, which is fitting into an M&A technology roadmap of tech companies. Fantastic idea, but it needed that tech side of it for different reasons. It didn't take off. We spent some time trying to do it. The other thing also, you're probably aware of the Agni program from the PSA office. So that program also is fantastic. I was saying, look, researcher, they said they will fund a market study. They'll get some of the best minds, the business analysts, to come and put together a business plan for your technology. Find the right use case. Now, where they went they assume the researcher is entrepreneur. We told them, because they got to know what we were doing. We had a lot of conversation with the PSA and his team on this. They said, we had gone too far. Next round, we will change, but next round never happened. So it didn't work at all. I mean, if you're aware.
Ramesh, the thing is this, right? There is a push. There are two directions from which you can start, right? You can start from the direction of the market, right? Where the innovation has become mainstream, the business has been built out, right? And on the other side, from the lab, right? Now, if you start from the lab, it is always a push model and the inertia is very high.
Yes.
Right? Very difficult to beat it. Whereas if you start from the other side, which is a pull model, at least you can make sure that you are able to pull where the rope is not limp.
Yes, where at least you can pivot it to get some, yes.
Correct.
Yes. No, I think, no, absolutely. So
see, the problem with most research labs, not just in India, world over, is that every researcher has a good golden hammer.
They don't know the nails.
Looking for a nail, right?
Yes.
But the trick is in having any hammer and looking for a golden nail.
That's very nice you're putting it. I'm going to borrow this line from you.
So that's
Talk about hammers and nails.
That I think is the trick.
I think I think you said it so clearly, so concisely, that golden nail is what nobody is looking for. We think we have a golden hammer, so we can do something with it. But no, that is so true. That is so true. Before we take, I think we have a few more minutes before we should give some time for questions. So now you touched upon it briefly. The chief scientist, there's a CBO type person who's going to be taking also a co-founder. Now, what are some standard equity models at the early stages? Either way, I mean, a researcher trying to become a startup, finding a co-founder, or somebody that got the golden nail, coming in, talking to the research group and saying, look, let's jointly do it. And there's some facilitation, right? There's something facilitating in the middle. What are some of the equity models in the early stages?
See, 2-3 frameworks. Number one is you can't kill the goose that is laying the golden egg. So any model in which the innovator is not incentivized. Sometimes it is very easy to look at a curation model where the innovator is almost reduced to an employer with some potential upside, right? So never have a model in which the source of innovation, right, is not incentivized for upside or success. Number one. Number two, technically you can break this down, right? So a good construct will be to look at any other startup, right? A typical startup with some 3 founders, right, with complementary skills, each one of them having about 1/3 in the company, right? Or 50, 20, 25, 25. One of them is on the sales side, one of them is on the technology side, the third person is on the product side, right? So one is selling, one is figuring out what needs to be sold, and the third person is building, right? Now, each one of these people have a certain stake in the company, and then they need capital to grow, right? So in the seed round, the investor comes in, gives the capital so that they can validate and move on. Essentially, whether you look at it in venture curation, whether you look at it in the research model, the roles are the same, right? So if you're saying you're bringing in a CBO and offering them to the innovator, right? So already you're talking about the innovator being the primary founder and the CBO almost being a co-founder, right? Because they are bringing this out. So you can look at an equitable distribution of these two, right? That is the role of the CBO. On top of this, you are bringing in some more capital into the company. Then the investment itself will require a little bit of dilution commensurate with the risk of the investment and the quantum of investment, right?
So sorry, go ahead.
No, please ask.
And I was going to say, like, talking about that seed equity, we put some money, like if you take our model at IIIT, we have so where we do put some money up front, but it's very small money. We can put maybe, like, we fund a few engineers. So, the entrepreneur comes, we say, like, okay, few engineers will fund because there's no money to pay. And we pay some nominal amount and some maybe 5-10 lakh seed grant. Now, we are very clear. This is not compelling enough. If you want to build a serious product, have a serious thing, it's just not compelling enough. Are there any good sources for, like, say, 50 lakh funding, for instance, in that stage?
So the right way to look at it is not in terms of defining an absolute number, 10 lakh, 25 lakh, 50 lakh, or a crore. The most important thing is for the company to move from a certain milestone, right? Let us say you are moving from an idea to a working prototype, right? Proof of science. So funding needs to be thought in terms of milestones, right? If an idea takes, maybe 1.5 crores for it to build out a prototype, a 10 lakh or a 25 lakh is not going to work, right? So if we bring in the discipline of looking at how much funding is required towards what is the next milestone that is important for the startup to move from one stage to next. Sometimes it could be moving from an idea to a working prototype. Sometimes it could be a working prototype that would actually be piloted in some real life context, right? That's the important number. And that number varies dramatically across business models.
True.
If you have a voice recognition software, right, it is not like you will need a lot of capital to move to a working pilot, even in a commercial context. Whereas if you are building out a sensor that has to work in an industrial context, right, with proof of no sparking whatsoever, right, which requires some 10 tests, right, and some certifications. It's not an easy product to build, right? Unless they have a visibility of 3 to 5 crore over a 12-month period, that product is not going to get built. So a lot of educational institutions in India think in terms of this 25 lakh, 50 lakh, right? I think the discipline to bring in is for a particular kind of startup, what is the right next milestone? To get there, what is the minimum capital they will need? Some cases it would be 25, some cases it could be 50, some cases it could be 2 crores. But you can't apply a 50 lakh number across the board just because the model allows for only that.
True. I mean, even 50 is not available, sadly, right? You're right. I mean, I think the outcome from this exercise should be like at least a pilot-ready product, right? You understood use cases, and for one use case, you built it, and it's at least a pilot-ready, if not a customer revenue-ready, at least a pilot-ready version is what we should be looking at. And if they don't have the challenges that you mentioned in terms of a hardware certification, testing, and such, if it is like, say, look at software-based solutions, so it may not need like a whole lot of money, but may still need somewhere in the 25 to 50 lakh range to get to that stage, even factoring the sweat equity of the founders. Now, what are some of the sources of funds for that level? Because VC funds are not there at that stage, right? To build the first pilot-ready prototype from research, there are no VC funds. Government funds
There's
are
a
there,
lot
but
of
very small.
lot of money available with corporates. This matching grant is an excellent model to build on.
But they don't fund innovation. See, matching grant, like for instance, DST, all the government funding agencies these days insist on
No. I'm
money.
talking about corporates.
But they have their own very narrow, at least the ones I'm aware of. Where there is some money available, it's very narrow problem scoped area that they
it's
are.
A good one to support. No, at least you have solved for the problem of whom are you building for.
But even those, maybe I should talk to you again. But they don't seem too many. Even those are very, very small in number. If you look at the possibilities, it's probably much more than the number of corporates that are willing to do this. But yes, that is one good source. We're trying to see what other sources can be. Like I said, I think I need to understand more of the Axilor labs and see is that something that can be scaled. We would love to leverage that for sure in some of what we are doing. But that's a good model. I think that is good that you're doing it because like you've been in this space long enough, and I think you see possibilities from research works that is not coming out today just because there's nobody doing it or there's no right structure to do it. And you're trying to bring that in through the Axilor labs. I think we need more of those.
I think institutions can partner with even global bodies. There are a number of grant making bodies. There are MNC corporate. There are VC funds outside of India in which the corporates are the LPs. So some bit of investor outreach beyond India as well may not be a bad idea if the technology is something that has global relevance.
Mm-hmm. I think, that's a channel. I don't think it's explored much. I mean, like in Hyderabad, in the medical side, you're probably aware of RICH. So that's an initiative where Ajit Rangnekar is the Director General for that. So they are trying in the life sciences space, specifically medical, but broadly life sciences, including agri and such, trying to connect the research because Hyderabad has this dense number of super high quality research institutions like CCMB, IIIT, the many institutions in the life sciences and agri space. So they're trying to connect that with corporates and they are playing that middle, that matchmaking, trying to find linking the golden hammer to the golden nails. Find both are difficult. If you talk to Ajit sir, he will tell both are difficult. You can't find the golden hammer and you definitely cannot find the golden nail. But I think we need more such models. I know IIT Madras is trying some of it. IIT Delhi has some success with their FIT, but very few and far in between. So hopefully in the coming years, we will see more of it. So with that, I would like to open up for questions. So Vanya, how are we getting the questions?
So we'll just ask everybody to put it on chat, or they can unmute themselves and ask away.
Yes, we have about 10-12 minutes.
Yes.
So any questions for VG or any comments also if somebody has some experiences relevant to the whole deep tech innovation. Okay, while the questions come up now, so VG, we touched briefly on the founders, at least the co-founders, but even in the early stages, you need to hire a few like engineers and such into the teams. So what is a good composition? Like, I mean, you need to get the techies. If you're a software product, you need to get the software. Like you said, if it's a speech product, you need to get the speech kind of engineers. So you need to get the engineers anyway. But I see a lot of the very early stage teams focusing completely on building the product. Are there other things they should be aware of, even if not as full-time team members, even in the very early stages? What would be a good team composition, even if it includes advisors and part-time team members?
I think some of the startups that have been successful with whom I have worked have done an excellent job of hiring interns. Right? Because it is possible for you to get them to work on very narrow areas. And if they really do a good job, then it can convert into a full-time opportunity. And finding a person in a narrow area with the kind of passion that they need to bring in is not a trivial problem for founders.
Yes.
So some of the startups that have really done well on building teams start at the intern level, and they build talent organically. Which also means that you have to start on your talent acquisition journey almost 2 years ahead. But that is something that is always paid dividends, because the risk is low. You can give something of value to the person. It is not very expensive, right? I know a company that is hitting Series A, right, which has almost 1/3 of its team as intern talent, but they have perfected that model.
Yeah, I know. It takes some amount of...
Today, if they have to scale, all that they have to do is to make offers to these people. That's number one. The second thing is, I think one of the founders has to be out there selling or talking to customers. I think in most deep tech startups, that is something that is a huge blind spot for founders. But on the other hand, wherever there is one of the founding team members who is doing this, the success rate of the startup is very high.
True, very true. I think that's very, whether you want to hire people or you want to discover some use cases or you want to discover prospects, investors, mentors, anybody, you're right. They should be out there. One of the founders has to be out there talking. And that's also almost always common in most successful startups.
I mean, finding a customer, finding an investor is not somebody else's job. It is a founder's job.
Yes.
And finding a customer and finding an investor is not a part-time job. It's a full-time job. So we are talking about one founder's full-time job being devoted to one of these two areas.
Yes. Absolutely.
Unless that happens, the outcomes are far from satisfactory.
Technology cannot sell itself, mostly. Sometimes, yes, rarely, but mostly it can never sell itself. So
it's difficult to find technology that's like gold, which doesn't need to be sold.
Yes.
Right.
Like I always say, like if you can solve hunger and poverty in a commercially viable way, there you go. You don't need to do much. But those are not easy. I mean, those are not easy to solve at all. So most solutions are not that kind of solutions. So you have to sell. So any questions? We can just pause for a bit.
Yeah. Hello,
yeah,
sir.
Sumit. Go ahead, Sumit. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, all. So I have we are working on deep tech startup, sir. So during our journey, we met a couple of investors like Ratnakar from Hyderabad and all. So one thing commonly coming up over here is like we are finding lot many competitors in similar space. So it is a very, when you look at the global aspect, the product what you're working on will be a very niche product. So in that situation, either we look at complete market focus or we look at competitors and also see that how that particularly works.
Sumedh, I missed the last part of your question. Come again. If it is a niche product, what was your question?
Do we have to look from market perspective and proceed with the market, or do we have to also look what competitors are doing and understand and then change our business model accordingly?
Sumedh, the answer lies in if you want to build out an innovation that has really large impact out in the world, and hence as a consequence you're looking at building a large enough business, then you have to find as many strong use cases or applications as possible. Now, whether these applications and use cases come from your competitors, whether they come from your customers, whether they come from your go-to-market partners, doesn't really matter.
And definitely to the other point that he made on competitors, I mean, if there are enough competitors already and you're going to be the N+1 to 1, there may not be enough value. So in what you're trying to do, you have to make sure there's a very good competitive positioning, maybe a segment and such.
Okay, understood.
So that is the other aspect that. Sorry, Sumit. Yes, Sumit.
I'm not.
Okay, I think it was on cross.
Good evening, Ramesh. This is Deeptech Startup. Sir,
Go ahead, Deepak.
Sir, how are you, sir? The session is awesome, sir. And hello, Vijay, sir. Sir, I want to mention one thing about my research project, which I had done in MTech in 2020. So it is on the VLSI design, like very large integrated circuit. So I have designed a high voltage lateral power MOSFET, which is used as a switching device in the mobile communication or in the DC controllers and etc. So, sir, the research which I've done, your research is going to be published on IIIT. So I would find a way out to patent it, because I searched a lot of various research articles. It is the latest technology on which I have worked, and I also searched about in the market whether the device that I have designed exists at that category or not. Like I have used the trench technology.
So the question, Deepak, is?
So the question is, like I was a student and I've done research on this topic. So, sir, I need to get a patent, and I need to get a patent and at the international level, so that my innovation is not copied. Also, I want to start a startup. So my question specifically is about that. With one product which is commercially viable, can we go for a startup? And it is not it's the latest technology in which I have researched. Companies like Fairchild Semiconductors have designed trench technology MOSFET electronic device, which has a voltage rating of like breakdown voltage has 150.
So I think, Deepak, I think we understand the question. We'll let VG comment on it.
Just last point. Then the latest device which is available in the market in that technology, MOSFET technology, high voltage MOSFET technology, is around 150 volts, and I have just increased that voltage from 150 to 182 volts. Also, I have
Deepak, just in the interest of time, you should engage with IIIT H and the incubator there, because institutions like this and the incubators there are essentially mandated with supporting startups like yours and helping you answer this question as well.
Yes, please do reach out, Deepak. You can reach out to me or just anybody in the incubator society, and we should talk. But I think at some level, VG, this is a, I see a lot of, especially if it's a researcher that wanting to be entrepreneur, they're a little too worried about their patents and such. And while it's important
See,
to be
I always tell startup founders, you can't keep your product, a secret from your customers.
Yes.
Right. So, the value of IP is in being able to give some proprietary value to the research that you have done and give it that kind of value for a reasonable period of time. But the applications of that and finding those applications is still your responsibility, right? Just claiming that this is too important an IP for me to really start working on commercial application, then that just means that you don't have your heart in building out a venture.
No, absolutely. I think that's what they get little. I mean, yes, the research work is very central and crucial. But if you don't have a problem that it can address, no point you're trying to patent. So that connect is often missing. But yes, we will. So I think we have come. We just have a minute left. So Vijay, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I mean, you're. Sorry.
Professor Ramesh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Before we even close out, for the benefit of everybody, I just had a question and I just wanted you to, address it in a minute. So for the benefit of all, I do know myself that how CIE is helping, deep tech startups. So I would just like you to, throw some light on the Avishkar program and just a broader view on it. And then we can close.
Sure, Vanya. Thank you so much. So the Avishkar program is for early stage startups that are pre-revenue, have a product, and they already know what they're trying to do and why, meaning what market use case are they going after. And and they're a deep technology startup. We take them into a 6-month program. So where we get the strategy mentoring, business, which is towards their first or early customers, mentoring, and also the technology research mentoring. So the 3 tracks of mentoring. So we take the early stage startups and get them towards early revenue. So that's the crux of the program for deep tech startups that are using technology where some guidance and advice from a research group will help. So that's the other thing we look for when we pick the startups up, apart from, of course, that they're going after a compelling market need. There is up to 40 lakhs of seed investment that goes into these startups, apart from the mentoring and such. So this has been running for the last 4.5 years now. We take about 3 cohorts every year. And so the call for the next cohort is out a couple of weeks back. So anybody, a deep tech startup in the early stages, pre-revenue, are most welcome to apply. But most of what we were discussing today is little earlier than that, right? A researcher, I mean, Avishkar is still somebody where at least they've already got a first version of their product, maybe not market ready yet, and they're already on a path towards a market ready product. If you look at researchers trying to productize, like if you take Deepak's example, I think that is before Avishkar, but they should reach out also. Like BG rightly said, academic incubators are best positioned to guide and help in that very, very early stages, where you're even thinking of, okay, this is my work, and it's a good problem to have. The research work is done already. So it's a fantastic stage to have the conversation, but the conversation is very important. So they should be talking to academic incubators even in that stage. So
maybe Ramesh, it's a good idea for you to have some kind of an open house format just on this question, right? Can my technology become a company? Right?
I think we should do that. Anubhav, let's organize for that separately. I know you're planning a couple of other around specifically around Avishkar. We should do that. We'll do that, Vijay. I think it's just to help. We have an information session sometimes. I think we should plan one this time. We do the boot camps also, Vijay. I'm not sure if you're aware. We do the idea validation boot camp where somebody has an idea. Of course, unfortunately, there are not so many that come with deep tech ideas. But every time we do, if there are about 8 to 10 starters, 1 or 2 maybe, not 2, 1 maybe that comes from research. Anybody with an idea thinking of a startup can come to the boot camp. And it's a 2-day boot camp where mentor-led, and all the case studies are their own ideas. So they're asked to do the worksheet, and the mentor looks at what they've done and then gives feedback to the whole batch. But I think this information session is a good one. We will do that. So Vijay, thank you so much. We've just gone 2 minutes over time. Thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure talking to you, Vijay. And I hope the current phase kind of fades away and then we can start. I was just beginning to plan my travel to Bangalore. I thought, okay, in April I will go.
So
And then
don't come.
Yes.
Don't
So,
come now.
and no, I have to go in February, March. I said, okay, April I will go to Bangalore and start my travel. Delhi and Bangalore was on my list, but unfortunately, it looks like another few months. We'll meet sometime. It's always pleasure. Such a rich set of experiences. I mean, you're is one of those few super enthusiastic investors that stays in touch with the ecosystem, go much beyond your portfolio. It's always a pleasure talking to you, VG. Looking forward to meeting
Thank you,
you sometime.
Ramesh. Thank
you
you
so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, VG. Thank you, Ramesh.
Bye.
So I hope everybody got some insights from the session. I did. Guys, I mean, I have also dropped a link for the Avishkar program. Please do check it out. It'll be very helpful for all the deep tech startups. Other than that, also, if you have any challenges that you're facing for your startups, please feel free to reach out to Headstart as well. Thank you for joining in, and please keep safe and stay healthy. Thank you. Thanks, Anubhav. Thanks, Pragya.